All right, hey y'all. We are finally live. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but we are here with Nadia and Obasi, aka Queen Goddess Hope. We are always connected together in conversations in the background. But today we wanted to talk to you about the series Them. So Obasi, give us a great opening.
Not us, but them. Um, actually, actually, a friend of mine referred this movie to me like in 2021. He was like, "Yo, bro, you really got to look at it." And I looked at it, and the first thing I thought, I was like, "Oh, this is a horror movie." But once I got through the first season, I was like, "Oh man," the first two episodes, I was like, "Oh." And it's it really focuses on I wear the Sankofa around my neck, and it's so reminiscent of going back and coming forth. And we have to know where we were previous to understand how we got here now. And that was like during the Great Migration period when Compton, out of all places, Compton is all white. And it's like, oh, this is interesting. And what I want to focus on and talk about, and I know we're gonna break it down like a playground, is the psychological effect of being around them constantly. And this was all what, a 10-day time span?
I know, right? Every episode was a day.
So 10 days. 10 days to break your psyche. So imagine years. Imagine hundreds of years. So that's when I was like, yo, I was talking about it actually on one of my TikTok lives because I was talking about how the breaking of us was slow and deliberate. And I used the picture of the daughter Ruby, and on the you can see on the what's it called, the photo where she has the white paint dripping down over her, and when you really get into that, we understand what the white paint symbolizes. And I was like, yo, this is so telling to what we doing and dealing with now of the raccoon infestation. And I was like, yo, I know who will understand this. Hey, yo, Queen, yo, you gotta check this out. Yo, you gotta check this out and give me your feedback. And then I did that. Now we here.
Man, and I was like, I'm a little chicken. I know it doesn't seem like it, but being raised as a Jehovah's Witness and then coming into where I am now, I still carry a lot of that trauma and fear on me because when I was 5, I was exposed to The Exorcist. And my dad was watching it one day. I'll never forget in the living room. And I went in there and he was like, girl, you better go back in the room. And I was like, no, I want to watch this. So I watched it from the door and I was terrified for the rest of my life. So that's why I don't like horror. I could watch Saw, but I can't watch stuff like that paranormal activity. So when you had me watching this, I was like, hold on a second. This seems a little scary. I'm gonna have to watch this in the daytime because you're absolutely bugging right now, right? And you thought that was funny, but I'm dead ass. Like I was a little traumatized because I was like, the music is a little eerie. This is really heavy on my spirit. I don't know who's lingering in the basement. Like I got too many questions to be watching this by myself at nighttime. But I definitely feel like it was really heavy, right? There was no comic relief. There was really nothing to kind of sugarcoat. It was really raw, the show them, and I was really annoyed because at the end of the day, how many more times do we need to see this type of traumatic experience on television? And then the other part of me felt like a little bit relieved because with them taking out Black history from schools, out of textbooks, out of things like that, you still have the option to show this to your kid if you really want them to know what Black people endured when they're faced with that first instance of racism in schools.
Yeah, and that's really kind of like, I'm glad you plugged that in with like the critical race theory, because we need to, and I tell a lot of the brothers that I'm around, I said, yo, we need to analyze these films. We need to kind of like psychoanalyze these films. And one of the first things in episode 1 that kind of got me was the signing of the contract. So the signing of the contract and the deliberate tactics to keep you trapped.
Mm.
Like, and that's always something that's telling to me when we kind of want to figure out the power structure. It's like, it's not
Right.
that they're overtly telling us. It's not that. You know, that's kind of like a microcosm. Yeah, they can kind of do it in our face, but it's the thing that they sit at those round tables and talk about. So the thing where the husband was kind of foul is that you read that little fine print of no, like honestly, of no Negro blood shall own this. You read that, and you still thought that was a good idea,
Facts.
right? You still thought that was a good idea because I think, and we still use this kind of like mentality today, to where we think being adjacent to them is better. When we look at the education, good education,
Mm.
really, and I definitely want to hear your input on this. Really, what stood out to me was a couple of things. How you'll have the good ones that's present in the room, right? And we saw this in we even saw that in the covenant that we'll cover later. That you'll see the ones that's kind of not down with it, and they know it's wrong, but they not gonna really go against the grain. They're kind of gonna be like, I effed up. The lady that was having them to sign them blood contracts, she knew it was messed up, but we saw the sexism right there. We saw
Definitely.
in the room, she wasn't even relevant.
That was interesting because they made it plain too, right in front of her face. Right? We thought that you were going to be a different type of woman because you had a little bit more gusto than the male, cause and then we also see that she had to pay off the police officer to kind of be like the good cop. We should have known there was something in the back end for that too. But just, my career as a retail banking personal banker and working in the banks and being a real estate agent for New Jersey, you realize that redlining is a real thing. And we see that this was definitely, in Compton, because I know Compton to be something different as someone who's, frequented to California throughout my lifetime. I've been going to Cali since I was 2 years old. So being out there and knowing that I'm going to eat Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles in Compton because it tastes a little better in Compton, that good old Obama special. And it's like when you are faced with the night and the day scenario of how Compton actually looks now versus what it looked like in the show itself, it really made you think. And it made me think about how when I first went down to my mom's in Alabama, the first thing that I did was go to the cemetery that same night. I went to visit the cemetery to pray to my ancestors and say, hey, can you protect me on this land until I actually know what took place on this land? The second thing that I did was look up the blueprints of the land that I was on because you need to know like what was there. What am I actually buying into, right? Because I feel like if they did some real true research before they just fled from their trauma, because that goes into the healing mechanism, right? When you just feel like you can put a band-aid on something and just flee to another town, another city, another home without actually doing the healing work, job waiting for you or not, you're still going to have to be faced with that trauma when you arrive. So looking at the blueprints and understanding the clauses of the mortgage, because in most cases, and it's different now, right? You usually sign the mortgage before you arrive, right? There, if we could do it electronic now, you don't really need to be physically there, with someone, but they read the clauses after the fact. So when you see like no one of black ancestry or black blood should be living in that home, you don't know what happened to that town specifically prior to you arriving. You don't know what you're walking into.
Right, right. You don't know what you're walking into, and the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? So when I looked at some of the ways that they begin, because it was almost like they were, it was like a subculture shock for them to see this black family come in, and then you kind of see the people stop, and it's like looking, and it's like, and then here comes the stereotypes. So I noticed in a lot of the sections, even in the covenants, like I said, that we'll get to, they always use these stereotypes, and we're constantly. I said, and I was saying this on my live. I said, one of the most overused words in 2024 was narcissist. I got so tired of hearing narcissist, narcissist. Everybody's a narcissist, and the fact that we don't understand, America is the blueprint. White supremacy is the blueprint for narcissism because they constantly gaslit them. Like, it was, how many, 3 days, and the police is beating on the door. I'm like, oh, this is symbolic. 3 days and the police is beating on the door. And what was crazy was like how the males were thinking about the Ruby. They were like, because in their minds, we're hypersexualized. Everything that they are, they say we are, right? So in their mind, little girl, they just want to be a little girl. She ain't even thinking about this. He's like, if his son get a hold of this, once my son see this, she's going to basically contaminate my son. So I was like, okay, see where y'all going with this. Mm-hmm. And did you pick this up? But I said, I saw like my word is I always say, I saw like the origins of Neighborhood Watch. Like,
yep.
Literally, Neighborhood Watch.
George Zimmerman, big time energy. Facts. And it's so interesting because, one thing that the show made me feel is like appreciation for our ancestors, point blank, period. The things that they had to endure, even in their own home, like you're technically not safe. And one thing that this series, taught me was episodes 1 through 10 was basically watching how it didn't let up, that persecution is consistent and constant. And even when she still allowed her entire family, Lucky, to beat all of their personal demons that they were all facing, right? Because we could go into breaking down each character and the PTSD, right? So breaking down all of that, defeating all of their demons, including the demon that lived in their basement, and recognizing that now they have to still go out and face their neighborhood. You defeated all of the demons that were in your home, and now you still have to deal with your neighbors as literal demons as well, right? And then also Henry defeating the police officer or killing the police officer that was technically the only person who was protecting them in that town. So now what do you have, right? We are faced with a cliffhanger in a sense, and also faced with the concept and the idea that regardless of if you defeat one demon, there's still going to be another demon lingering in the background, right? Now you still have to face that daily persecution. It reminded me that every time Black women or Black men go out into the universe, into the ethers, into this three-dimensional realm, we're still faced with a lot of underlying issues and racism. And this is why I'm sure everybody says that you should love who you love, but I feel like people who are melanated should be together because there's no other person on this planet Earth who will understand the types of persecutions and demons that you face except for somebody who looks like you, right? We're going to both understand what that trauma feels like.
Absolutely. There's a saying that I heard a time of 15. It says, love might be where you find it, but culture determines where you look. And that always stood out to me when I heard that, because like you said, people have the right to do whatever they want. But I, as a Black man in my right mind, even if I was a Black man, even when I was a Black male in my wrong mind, I never desired them. Even when I didn't know and it wasn't in my higher mind, and I saw the world from a integrationist perspective, everybody's everybody. I was once there. I never had a desire to be with them because something just didn't feel like it belonged, right? So once I began to read and like, oh, that's what doesn't belong. Because what was like the way they talk, see, and what I tap on Negroes' heads about is how they constantly demonize black women. Like y'all really have it. They constantly demonize black women, and then they look at they'll take white girls or white females and look at them as they're this like meek, soft, submissive. And notice the neighbor
Mhm.
was in a homeowners meeting. Notice how she was talking. She was like, "This is a divine right, or this is a right of ours." And
Mhm.
this is still the lineage. This is still like the techniques that they use. Like what I notice constantly is how what we looking at now, because it's so we looking at it now. How they create the problem, right, Queen? They create the problem and then pretend like they have to solve it because the other person, just by them being right there. So and I'm like,
Mm.
yo, she's like, yo, we got to protect what's ours. You know, once one come, then there goes. I think that's where there goes the neighborhood like line came from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you don't notice, like when they were all in the bankers meeting, right, and they had the blueprints of the town out, that was where redlining came from because they had parts on the map that were literally red, talking about this is where we want to run down this neighborhood, right? They were giving them 20% more money. Because think about it, the value of the homes were already up and integrating the neighborhood came with more incentive. So you already got the increase in your home value plus they were going to give you another 20% on your sale price if you decided to move. So now you're helping them two times during that process to get more money. And this is exactly where generational wealth gap comes into play between black homes and white homes, right? You have that generational wealth gap because most of the time, a lot of the time, when a white family marries, they're now gifted hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes as wedding gifts and they're given that or sometimes they're given that down payment assistance to purchase a home once they get married. I don't know any person from even my high school days, because I did go to a suburban white school, predominantly white school, where people get married and they immediately move into a home together as husband and wife. They purchase a property with the down payment assistance that they received from wedding gifts. I don't know many black people that have done that.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I think that's in the breaking of the culture. Like we don't, that's no longer there, right? So let me ask you a question. Being in that PWI, did you
Hmm.
feel any of that? Did you kind of, did you feel any of not what Ruby was going through, but did you ever feel like shades of that?
Well, I'll tell you what. So in ninth grade in 1999, I ended up going from Staten Island, New York to Old Bridge, New Jersey. And it went from a predominantly melanated school where maybe the 1% was black, where everyone was either black or Hispanic, to that predominantly white school. But I felt like it was more of like the United Nations and it was a cluster of people from all around the world, but still predominantly white, right? And you are now looking like, A, this is a culture shock because I went from inner city, super hood, amongst peers that I felt comfortable with to now, what is this? I'm meeting people from Czechoslovakia, from Poland, from Egypt, like the real, people are now immigrants to this land, into this school. And while I probably felt uncomfortable and they immediately gave me to a black guidance counselor, I feel like her name was like Miss Scott or something. She took care of all of us who were melanated. You know what I mean? We didn't really go to the white guidance counselors because they wouldn't be able to talk like us or relate to us. And I remember trying to get into the African American studies classes and I couldn't. that class was always filled up to the max. Like they were sold out, you know what I mean? In high school, I couldn't take those classes. Then I wanted to get into like home economics and, engineering, different classes like that. I couldn't get into those classes. My electives were always art. Uh, I don't
Mm.
know, I can't think of something else, but I remember taking electronics and ROTC, and that was okay for me. You know what I mean? Because my mom was like, "Hey, you need some discipline." And in ROTC is where I made friends with serious individuals. Some of them are pilots today. Some of them work for the FAA. Some of them are engineers. And I feel like ROTC gave me an out that I didn't know that I needed in that predominantly white school. And it also taught me discipline, consistency, and physical fitness, but not necessarily where I felt segregated or out, because I felt that most of the people that were in ROTC was a healthy bunch of races, different races. Sure, they did not look like me, but I was always friends with all the black kids anyway because they looked like me, right? There was probably maybe 30 to 50 of us in the whole school, and we had a graduating class of like 2,000 kids.
Mm.
So I can't say that I ever felt out of place, but I just knew that I was cool with the people who were in my class because I was a Jehovah's Witness then. I was still going to the Kingdom Hall with my dad on the weekends. I was still going out in field service on the weekends. So if you come from a religion that teaches you all people are equal, going back to the show, right, with Mr. Epps or Epps, he was like the pastor of the town. When you're taught that you should love your neighbor and that all people are technically equal, you don't really look at race as what it is, right? So me experiencing racism, I'm sure I definitely felt it there multiple times, right? It was evident in so many various ways, and even just the lifestyle itself, because I went home to an apartment and these people were living in mini mansions, 5 bedroom houses, driving Audis and Vipers and shit to school. That was crazy to me. You know what I mean? So it was a definite night and day experience, and you definitely see the expression of class and how various people are given wealth, whereas people of color were not.
Yeah, but and that's something right there because I think about this and I'm like, yo, I don't know how my mental would have held up being put in Ruby's situation and even Gracie, she's little, but what was crazy that, like you said, you brought it up that they all had to conquer their personal demons, right? So by day 6, the demons are here and Ruby is starting to see the white girl, the little white girl that she's playing with, and at first she thinks she's real, but then I'm like, this is like, would that be like a personality disorder? Like multiple, this is like multiple personality. This is, I'm like, yo, so I'm looking at how it affect them. Then, the little girl, she's going through what Miss Vera is telling her. And then what we look at is like, we looked at how it collectively but separately broke the black family. Like,
Right. I,
he had to go on the job and he began to deal with the tap dancer or the trickster because that really was also the trickster. And he had to go deal with that, but she had to stay, which was the worst job. You had to stay. Even though they had outlets, she had to stay right there in the home.
and you know what? That goes to the stay at home mom, right? That whole lifestyle and that obligation, and it goes into like Henry's character, lack of emotional intelligence because of the mustard, right? Mustard gas that he experienced during the war. So, that took on its own side effects, and it gave him like a lack of empathy because he was always so trapped in his mind, right? So just thinking about Henry, he had, psychological disorder from being experimented on during World War II. Also living with the trauma of not being there with his wife because he wanted to take his daughters to the movie theater early, right? They left an hour early, which could have allowed him to prevent his wife and son, being raped and murdered. And then now we have the that PTSD of his wife, dealing with that trauma. And then now also dealing with the delusion that she's incapable of mothering her children or protecting them, especially in a situation now where they move to a new town and now you can't protect them because you're fighting your own personal demons of, can I protect my children? I couldn't protect my son from being murdered, right? And now you have this young girl, Ruby, who is a teenager who's believing that she's ugly because she is black and beautiful, but because she's filled with a school full of white, predominantly white race children, is she even capable of being looked at as beautiful because people are looking at her funny and funky, right? Because if it's not white, it's not right type vibe. And then you got the little girl, what was her name? Her start with a
Gracie.
Gracie, yeah, Gracie Jean, I think, or something.
Mm-hmm.
So you got Gracie, and she's dealing with Miss Vera, who to me was basically like the opposite of her mourning her mom from being a teacher. Because don't forget, her mom was a teacher. So it's almost as if she was like mourning because she doesn't really understand that her brother was murdered, right? She's a little kid. She's probably what, in like first, second grade, something like that. So she doesn't really understand. She just knows that her brother is no longer here. And she's calling her mother crazy. She's not really understanding that this is a trauma. And now she has two parents that are facing PTSD because you can't put it any other way, and they're bouncing their illusions and delusions off of one another. So a child who's left to her own emotions only has her imaginary friends, Miss Vera, from a book that she's reading that's made out to be real, right? Because of the guy in the basement. He's actually playing on their traumas and trying to push them out of the home and out of the town because he has his own trauma back in the early, what was that, like 1800s, like some part in the 1800s where the black family came to the town and, because their wagon was broken. So now we're looking at Christianity being demonized, right? Now we're seeing him make a deal with the devil, technically, to live forever in a basement to make sure that he torments people and live off of their traumas. Now, for me, that represented generational curses and real life demons living in people's homes. Because how many times have people say like little kids see things, right? They have access to the social room kind of like a cat does. How many times have you heard this house is haunted, or how many, there's something in the closet? Kids are always in fear of that, right? How many times have we heard about these things throughout our childhood? Or, this person dealt with these types of psychological issues, so of course now it's in the bloodline, right? Or you see people being born of incest and now they're trapped with those same type of delusions and curses, generational curses, right? They're just patterns being passed down. So just as much as we may have our own traumas being passed down through our DNA, when we are witnessing developers, real estate developers, tear down land and they build homes on top of cemeteries, who's to say that those homes really aren't haunted? And I feel like that movie or that series allowed us to see that these things are not fake. We're not far off from these thoughts at all.
But I'm glad you touched on that too with the whole making the deal with the devil, because the playbook don't change. They might add a new shotgun, they might add a run play or two, they might add something, but the foundation of the playbook never changes, right? And it was interesting when he said that when they turned on them, they used them for the labor, right? They sold them community. They said, yo, this is equality. So we saw how Christianity was demonized, but we saw how it was weaponized also. So he was back
Mhm.
because he knew he was wrong. And instantly they have to rationalize, like, well, how did he find water? And we've been trying to find water all this goddamn time. How did he find water? Ah,
Right.
must be evil. They always got to demonize you. So then once we begin to see them, we begin to see their energy change. But their energy was always the same, even when they was in the lunch hall eating. And you
Mhm.
always gonna have the one or two that don't feel that way, but they're outnumbered. So
Mm.
what was interesting when they was making the covenant, he said, you must break them. He said, how? Then the thing told him, a wound to the heart is like a door. Walk through the door and break their hearts from the inside. I was like, yo,
That's when he made the deal with the devil with the
yo.
same exact thing.
But see, this is where they are also the tricksters, in my opinion, because they use that friendliness, and we a lot of our people don't psychologically understand who they are. So when they're kind,
Right.
we extend that olive branch and we're like, yo, and we invite them into our hearts. It's like,
Mhm.
but what was crazy, and how did you make out of this? Remember when they read the scripture and they began to talk about the alien? Was he seeing her as an alien, or was he seeing her as, because remember when he dropped, I think he dropped a pen or something. She picks it up and give it to him. He began to spaz out. She's like, so it put her in a situation like, I'm not gonna let them pump me. Like they knew from the start that you never intended on keeping your word. Be careful of making these deals with these devils. You never intended. You used us for this labor. And then they rationalized it and said, yo, you stole something. Here go the trumped up charges. Here go the, this is not even a trumped up charge. This is a false charge. You stole
Mhm.
your own horse. Aha, you stole your own horse. So how we gonna punish you? We just gonna punish you. We're gonna make you blind. I'm like, yo, what the fuck, yo?
And all the while she was in labor
Otherwise, she's in labor.
the whole time. Then you know what's so interesting? Think about it's a similarity to Henry Emery when he was in the elevator with the two guys and they dropped the pen again.
Ah, Dawn so did. And they so did. And he bent down and gave them the pen.
Totally different outcome. He thanked him instead this time. That's what I'm saying. Like this show is very interesting.
Yes.
And the whole thing about being an alien, it just means that you're not from here, right? Like me. I know I'm not from here, but it just means
You
you're
know, I
far
thought of you when they put that alien out.
because these are facts. But yes, that's what that meant. Like these are outsiders. These are people who are alien to this town, right? And in that instance, he kept praying. Think about it. He kept praying, God, show me who these people are. I have a feeling about who they are. It doesn't sit right with me. And he thought nothing wrong of it. But it wasn't until he felt God gave him permission to mistreat them all of a sudden. And then think about it. This guy had his own delusions because fast forward that he also lost his son and his wife, right? So now he also having psychotic episodes? Was he also seeing fake things? Because the little boy ended up being a demon and he thought that in the bush he really was gifted a son when in reality it wasn't. It was just a demon trying to coax him into purgatory, if you will.
Because remember when they go down into the safe passageway, the little boy, or he thinks what he thinks is the little boy, shows him the way. He gets down there this way, makes this covenant. And it was like what you just said, yo, you can never let up on these people. Now, if you let up and you don't give them hell, we're gonna give you hell. We're gonna give you purgatory. If you don't be cruel to them, we're gonna be cruel to you. And when I think of their psyche, because when you look at people like um Charlie Kirk, that is their way of thinking. But they're Christian. They love you. It's like
But
I talk about this movie right here, Queen, and this is something else you guys see, and that's what we should do, like movie reviews. There's an old '90s movie with John Travolta and Harry Belafonte called The White Man's Burden. You ever seen that movie?
mm-mm.
Yo, that movie right there is something else because the roles are reversed, right? So we are on top. It would be what you would call, quote unquote, black supremacy, right? So John Travolta is the average working white boy, but he's being racially profiled. Police, black police officer, pull him over, beat the hell out of him. But when we really understand the white man's burden per se, they
Mhm.
always that it's their job to civilize us.
And I just want to know who made them in charge.
Who told you this was your job? Who told you you were the bringers of salvation?
I just want to know. And you know what's so interesting to me? Because during the pandemic, I was, of course, researching coronavirus and, this whole entire thing to the depths of me. And then I was also researching the dynasties of the world. And every time I started looking into it, and I've even gone to the African American Museum in DC, the Smithsonian, and they show you the origins of Black people, right? From royalty, you know, and recognizing that, they believe that this in the Bible that we were given a 400-year-old curse, which is why we are treated the way that we are. But if we know that the curse was broken in 2019, then why are we still dealing with all of this victimhood?
Was it even ever a curse, or was it just one big mindfuck?
I mean, according to, I feel spiritually it was
Okay.
a curse because that was when slavery began. And I feel like we should have never trusted them in the first place. Because if you look at an ancient map of Africa, you can see that a lot of European countries and other lands were the owners of Africa, if you will. And it all just because they were trading natural resources and, produce with other nations. And it was fine until the white people became greedy. And next thing you know, they're trading people. And I feel like once you kind of cross lines and you went from goods and services to people, that was really where the true curse began because we know Ghana to be one of the people who started that, right? That slave trade of actual people. Because there were people who were indentured servants, but we all know that indentured servitude ended at a certain mark, whether if it was 5 years, 7 years, or if you still have more debts you had to pay off, then you renewed your contract for another 7 years, right? And it also goes back into the video that I just did about the year of Jubilee, right? On that 49th and 50th year of Jubilee, you were supposed to actually let anybody with any kind of debt, people, um, and servants and slaves, people and prisoners in jail, they were all supposed to be free on that 50th Jubilee year. So with the trade of people and you no longer observing the Jubilee year, now you just curse the land not once but twice. So I feel like, yes, I do feel like there is definitely a curse. How do we, obliterate that? That's just by, operating in the love frequency and getting out of hate, right? Ending racism. I'm watching football the other day, unfortunately, and there's, end racism on the field, right? On one of the games. I feel like the moment we stop allowing this government head to be in power, there has to be a capable succession plan. Right now, we have leaders that are 80 and 90 years old in office, when in reality, we need to transition that hand to younger people, 30s, 40s, maybe even 50s, right? People who are still within that working phase who believe that they can actually make a change. Because if we are still allowing the people who have come from racism who are still racist, we're never going to see that change. We're never going to see that leadership or that succession take place where new schools of thought are introduced. Who's to say that this law that's being provided, even with the new government shutdown, there are things that will continue to work against us. We need somebody who's going to, work for us and recognize that there are 98% of people who are dealing with trauma from bloodlines ago
Hmm.
that we need to like get rid of.
You know, when I think about it, puts me in the mind of the slogan "Black Lives Matter." Right? When I hear "end racism," when I see "end racism" in the end zone, because
Hmm.
we're quick collectively, people that don't understand. Like they'll say, and I know Kevin Gates is one of the ones that's really good with saying who Black Lives Matter too, because and then they get off into that spiel. But it's like, why is that in racism even there? Like who? Like it doesn't benefit them to end it, right? Because like you said earlier, it's the constant suffering. So what was crazy is to see, and I was telling a young man this, and I think I was sharing this with you when we were talking. I was talking to an 18-year-old young man, and he got shades of Ruby in him because that's how it gets you. That's how the self hate does. It makes you look at your people the way they start to look at their mother. You don't understand the oppression. You don't understand the trauma. You don't understand the social learning theory. You don't understand how all of this stuff is laid out. So you begin to say, yo, my people are crazy. My people are bugged out. But it's all because, as a saying I like to say, it's the poison in the cookie dough. We've been fed poisonous cookies. So now we're sick. And the love frequency is the cure. The love, we really have to understand that. And I can't push that enough because what we saw with that couple that went into that town, they never turned on each other. No matter what they were going through, we never saw them arguing toward each other. Even when they had their eyes burned out, the husband is still, if you notice the husband, he's still like he's trying to reach around. He hears his wife, but he's trying to reach around because they still had each other. Our hearts weren't broken. Our connection, our love, our frequency wasn't broken. And so
Mm.
I had to tell him, back to the NFL thing. I said, well, because he kept saying, we need to basically pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and we need to become owners. And I said, well, yo, bro, I said, well, do you watch? He's 18. I said, well, do you watch football? He says, yes. I said, well, who's the race, if we want to use that, and say, well, who dominates the field? He says, us. I said, cool. I said, well, okay, let's go up a ladder. I said, well, do you know what the Rooney Rule is called? He says, the who? I said, the Rooney Rule, Rooney. He says, no. I said, well, that's just a thing that they put in there because it's just like the end racism. It's the thing that says, I have to interview a minority candidate, but I really don't have to give him a job. Jerry Jones, the Dallas Cowboys owner. I can't see how people are Dallas Cowboys fan with it. But Jerry Jones, he definitely always never has given a black head coach a job. But he always says, Queen, he says, not because of racism. I just always go with the better candidate. So I told him, I said, well, the Rooney Rule, I said, now let's go on up to the commissioner. What color is the commissioner? Non-black, white guy. Okay, that's the overseer. This is the plantation overseer. Now let's go up to the highest, the owners. How many owners are there? He says, I don't think too many. I said, try zero, young homie. I said, and that is the reality because we're still allowing them to get paid off our backs. While they go out there and they risk CTE, they go out there and they risk all these injuries. They dope them up, inject them with pain killer to get them out there because it's the glory of the game. Dallas
Yes.
Cowboys, look,
Both
the Dallas
no.
Cowboys are America's football team.
Mm.
That figures.
And the NBA is no different, and that's why I don't subscribe to sports, respectfully, because I don't see it any different from, like every time I see the crowd cheering and going crazy and how they're idolizing their favorite players, it just reminds me of like some 300, you know, Rome type of field watching the prisoners entertain. That's literally how I see it, right? You're just a well bought slave. They give you a salary of millions of dollars and people are now sports betting on them. You have all of these types of things. I feel like it's just all one and the same, and that's why I just don't subscribe to it. Because why am I cheering on men being tortured? Because no one talks about the concussions and the aftermath that they're faced with dealing with on their own, going back to the show like Henry Emery, dealing with the PTSD after the war, right? I've been faced with people, even down in the country, veterans, you know, and it's Veterans Day, right? Think about these. I'm sure I have ancestors that were in my bloodline, and I always said there's no way that my ancestors would ever have fought in any war, and especially my Puerto Rican ancestry. Realizing that I was able to find draft cards from World War I and World War II, and I'm like, why would they even do that? Oh, because I know when United States took over the colony, Puerto Rico, all of a sudden everybody has to be drafted. Didn't matter what age you were. If you were a man, you had to be drafted into the war. So that was the only way my ancestors fought, which I hate to know, right? But they literally did this to Indian, Puerto Rican, and Black soldiers during World War II as a, let's see, we can call this a training exercise. So that mustard, gas was very symbolic in the show because there were points where his aggression was so angry, or so prevalent, I should say, that you could see the screen being that mustard color and him even seeing himself in the torture chamber. But just digging into the research of it all, it was saying that Henry was dealing with these delusions because he's wondering why he even survived in the first place.
Mm.
So it's like thinking about Tuskegee Airmen, thinking about, what other people of color had to deal with coming home from the war, how they're still dealing with it, which is why I also don't like 4th of July. We have these fireworks going off, and all it is doing is just reminding these veterans and these soldiers of their PTSD. So
Mm.
is America really a country of freedom, or are they just really a country who idolizes war and torture?
It's the constant gaslighting. Because what was crazy is to see how he had to constantly bite his tongue on the jaw so much that he was balling his fist when the guy who ultimately was the trickster, he's sitting there with his fist balled up because he got to eat that shit. He got to eat it because he got to take care of his family. So this is how we can understand also aggression, how it breaks the home too. I really can't let it out and put my foot in this white boy behind the way I want to. So I come home and I'm kind of just yelling. I'm yelling at the kids. I'm yelling because the noise, it might be a dog barking, all of these things. And you understand that PTSD and how that works. It's just like all these bells, whistles, and they can't make sense of it because you still gotta survive because you don't want to be lazy. We heard him call that guy lazy. He done sit here and dug that ditch, found water, but that's how they was doing. Notice their aggression was starting to wrap up. He's like, don't bring all these over here. I never seen nobody so lazy. And that's why I always tell people I'm not a fan of that word. Sure, I know that aren't as motivated as they should be, but I'm not a fan of using that word against our people because that was one of the words that was weaponized and used to make us work. And so now, how it is now, we want to prove ourselves through our labor and we want to prove our worth and we want to prove, see how good I am. I work. What does Steve Harvey say? You got to outwork, you got to almost work yourself into the ground. We got to prove ourselves through the labor because we never want to seem lazy to these people. When meanwhile, they always the ones with their feet kicked up, taking credit for your work.
Yeah, like I'm ready to retire and I just turned 40 like 3 days ago.
See?
You know what I mean? I feel like this is a healthy retirement age in real life. I've done so much work, and I don't think that people recognize that as soon as you stop working, that's when you die because your body has toiled for 40 plus years, right? And to your point about being lazy, I was just sharing with somebody recently, like, I definitely feel like I don't even know how to rest, even rest my mind, because at times I always feel like I have to keep creating, going on to the next project. And maybe that's why I'm so relentless in my entrepreneurial endeavors because I feel like I can't rest. How many times have my parents, put that into your mind? Like, you taking a nap is almost bad for you, right? Just even taking a day off is cruelty. That's why 2 weeks should be adequate enough for anybody because you should not be resting. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think anybody should be working past 40 realistically, especially if you've already put so much in, whether if it's physical or mental, working a 9 to 5. being in a corporate setting. I was just saying this too, how in New York City, right, growing up, if you had a corporate job, you were considered like creme de la creme because everybody couldn't work in Manhattan during those days, right? Oh, you work in the city? Like that was a flex. People were like in banking or retail jobs, teachers, like, the regular chill jobs. Those were like elite jobs if you were known as a teacher. Engineers and IT people were like at the top of the food chain, of course, but you were like one of few who had those types of jobs and careers back then, right? Most people were stay at home makers as far as women. And, when I think about it, I'm like, if women take a back seat and go back home, kind of like, Lucky was at home full time, all of these drugs would flood the market once again. And men would have jobs, right? Black people right now, to kind of go to your point about they have to interview black candidates, but they don't necessarily need to hire them. There were 1 million people fired this year so far, about 800,000 people last year. So that's almost 2 million people without jobs, right? In 2 years' time. So now we're sitting here like, okay, so where are all these people? What are they doing? Where are they working? How are they making income? We don't think about that. And then now we're also fighting with AI. And this is where that living wage comes in that I was talking about earlier in the year, right? They're trying to give everybody $75,000 to live because there's not going to be any jobs. This is all strategic, right? And to me, it's still a form of racism because Black people were about at 12% between 13%, in fact, amongst the 1 million people who were fired this year. We're still at the top of that list.
Right. And,
We're never receiving that break.
and it's crazy because even though DEI is not us, it's not, but it's aimed toward us. And
Yeah.
whenever I hear these crazy talking points, again, CK goes and says, well, when I get on a plane and I see a black pilot, I want to know that he's qualified for it. And I said, dude, do we realize Linda McMahon? I don't know if you're a wrestling fan, Queen, but
Hmm.
Linda McMahon is running the Department of Education. Now, she don't know much about that. She know how to take a Stone Cold Stunner. I said to take a body slam. So it's here's this illogical logic of being worthy. And I was helping a brother out on his post because he was defending himself in these talking points about pilots being qualified. Because here's what they're starting to, and this is the Ruby effect, that they're starting to make our very own people say they're just letting us fly a plane because we're black. So this means that I can just go out there and go get on a plane and just fly it because I'm black. And I'm like, I said, dude, I come in, Queen. I said, dude, you know what's crazy, bro? I said, people will get into driverless Ubers and trust that. But they will say, I hope this black guy that's flying this plane is qualified.
I just want to plug my cousin Kenny because he is a Black pilot, and him and his wife have a school that trains young, Black teenagers how to become pilots. So
Shout out.
shout out.
Uh,
And I would be perfectly safe flying on his plane via American Airlines. If I saw my cousin, I'd be like, yes, I'm flying with a Black pilot today. What's good? You
because
understand?
I get on a plane and I white pilot, I want to know that this plane is going to make it to its own destination where it's going. Not that it's going to fall down, but the fact that because we know when we get on ships and stuff like that, we end up in the wrong destination. So it's like we got to be careful of the trickster and the technology, and just looking. And what was crazy was when Ruby began to really fully embrace and she's in the gym and she's cheering all by her freaking self. And she's cheering and this is the scene I shared this on my TikTok where she says, I want it off of me. Here's this is we really are dealing with this today. She says, I want it off of me. She's looking at her beautiful black skin. She says, I don't want to be like that no more. I don't want to be like them no more, i.e. Officer Tatum with his foolish self, Jason Whitlock. She said, I want to be perfect. And then we see the kiss, and I felt like the kiss was the transferring of the taking of the melanin. And she, in her mind, she looks at herself and she sees herself white, kind of like imitation of light. And she looks in the mirror and she sees herself with blue eyes. So when we see a lot of these ladies that suffering from these identity crises, I don't believe in shaming them unless they're shameful. But I don't believe in shaming them because when we go back to the psyche of like Lil Kim, she was abused a lot. Biggie is not, he's not my guy. I'm just gonna say that. And he did a lot of damage to her. And then
Mhm.
I remember reading this magazine years ago, and she was saying that a lot of her ex-boyfriends, Biggie was one of them also, that left her for either lighter women or white women. So it puts that complex in them, like, what's wrong with my skin?
Not enough. Mhm.
Why am I not beautiful? Well, maybe if I lighten myself up a little bit more. Maybe if I make my hair blonde. Maybe if I mess with this nose a little bit. Get
Try.
these thin lips. I can't even whistle with these lips, but let me get these little thin. Let me get these thin lips and see. And it's like, yo, what happened?
I want to say something about this because, there were Outkast and Salt and Pepper were, amongst others, were inducted into the, Rock and Roll Hall of
Yeah.
Fame, I believe, over on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at Salt and Pepper, and I said, "Wow, Spinderella's the only one who looked normal because now Salt got the injections too, right?
Really?
She went
I didn't see
she's
her.
done some plastic surgery on her face because she does not look like herself." And I literally looked at the photo of Salt, Pepper, and Cinderella, and I said, "Wow, Salt and Pepper must got the same doctor because Salt now looks like Pepper." I literally could not determine which one looked like which. If I find a picture, yeah, I'm gonna show it to you. I saw it on the tube, but I was just like, this really breaks my heart because when I became free as fuck, I was literally like, it was 2017. So what was that, 7 years ago? So I was about 33, right? And I feel like when you hit those double digit master numbers, 11, 22, 33, 44, 55, 66, 77, so on and so forth, right? When you hit those master numbers, there are like pivotal things that change in your life. It's almost as if it's like an aha moment and your rose colored glasses come off every single master digit year, right? So when I turned 33, all of a sudden, I didn't see no wrong with my image because from 22 to 33, I was completely delusional. I was jumping on New York City couches, opening bottles of rosé with my girlfriends, dancing on couches in the club, DJ Envy. Like we was really wilding out, going club hopping because we had the money to do it and we didn't care. We either had men buying us bottles or we was just popping bottles because we could. And then it wasn't until I started going back into the church about 26, I was like, okay, I need to stop all of this. I got engaged and I, felt pretty because I knew how to dress. I knew how to style. So I felt like, okay, as long as my outfit looked good, I look good. It wasn't necessarily looking in my avatar in the mirror and admiring my looks. I just knew that people told me I was pretty because I was light skinned, right? And then I go down to Alabama and I'm considered the odd one. I'm not the beautiful one because I'm not brown skinned. So now
Really?
I got to deal, heck yeah. Even when I was just there dealing with modeling and all that kind of stuff, child, that colorism is real. People would assume like, oh, you're light skinned, you don't have to deal with that. No, I've dealt with colorism because people would rather have a brown girl than a light girl a lot of times. So I've dealt with that. But then when I turned 33, something in me just clicked and I was like, wow, I'm brushing my teeth and I realized I have freckles today. Right? You start looking at yourself, you start admiring yourself, you start feeling yourself. You got to think that these women were in their teens, early to late, teenage years into their 20s, and they're these big time public figures
Yeah.
on a massive scale, going back to Salt and Pepper on the hip hop era, right? They were at the brink and the genesis of hip hop. So now you may not feel beautiful. You don't know what kind of complexes they were dealing with. At the end of the day, they were still teenagers,
Yep.
women who were just budding. They really didn't have that guidance, right? They're still dealing with some form of racism in the music industry on
Right.
top of. So now you have so many delusions that are meeting you head on, right? And it was way more harsher. Think about during that time modeling, you had to be super skinny. and you had to look a certain way, right? I used to do modeling through Barbizon, and they told me that I wasn't good enough because I was short and thick. And I'm like, well, damn, I got to stop eating then. At this point, like, what is good for me, right? I don't wax or do anything to my eyebrows now, but in that modeling school, I had to tweeze my eyebrows to make them look pencil thin just so I could makeup them. So that trend that we see women coloring on their eyebrows now, I'm like, oh, I did that already. I was literally like 14 doing that, right? So I feel like I had a fast forward agenda of present day issues when it comes to nothing against people who do the makeup, glam, cake up, but at the end of the day, I've done all of that because I was introduced to that modeling agency, right? You had to have a thick skin when you went into those things. You didn't get booked or picked for jobs based upon your pictures and your physical look, right? So a lot of women today are not appreciating themselves in the mirror. Maybe their parents are still young and they haven't really been faced with that moment of, damn, I'm beautiful, but yet I have a mouth full of children, or mouths to feed. They don't even have that one-on-one time that they can admire and look at themselves in the mirror. They're worried about feeding their families. They're not worried about the looks on themselves, right? You're just worried about the other people outside of you. So when you have that moment to really sit in with yourself, whether male or female, you're like, okay, I do love myself. How can I show up as the beautiful me that reflects outwardly and not the demons that lie inside of me, right? It goes back to them, that demon in the basement harping on their insecurities that was within, and now it's reflecting outwardly, right? People are like, oh, your skin looks so great, you look so beautiful, this and that, because I've actually healed and done the work, dug into that deep shadow work to heal those demons that were plaguing me. And now I don't care because I'm like, okay, I'm freed from this, right? So I feel like that is no different from the BBL movement,
Yep.
from women not appreciating their looks, getting injections, whether lips, face, eyebrows, Botox,
Yep.
all of these things. I feel like none of that is different. It's just that women don't realize when you get into your 30s is really when you start appreciating you for your authentic self.
Right. And you mentioned the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Outkast, my favorite group of all time.
Yes.
But I was taking my baby to school this morning, and I noticed, like, over the weekend, I seen this one dude from Chicago, and I'm like, shut up, man. He's like, man, how long does Andre have to make a fool out of Big Boy? Why wouldn't he perform? Blah blah blah. He's really upset because Andre performed, right? So Andre explains. He says he deals with a lot of anxiety, and I'm like, how is this? But
Hmm.
from a person that you can be, it's like Michael Jackson. When we listen to Michael Jackson, and I don't know if this is like some um different personality, MK Ultra. I don't know if it's kind of like that or if it's just something else. But I noticed Michael Jackson and Beyonce both kind of said this at one time, that when they get on the stage, it's like something else clicks. Maybe
Hmm.
Virgo in them, but something else, and do their thing. But and then I was listening to the host on the radio. She was saying that what people don't understand is the older you get. Sometimes this was one of the late. No, this is one of the ladies that called in actually. She says when you get the older that you get, the more your anxiety intensifies. She says when my bank account get a certain level or a certain low to a certain level, I have all these anxieties. It bothers me. It bothers my sleep. And I said, sometimes we have to understand that these celebrities are still human, right? So of course we want to hear. I would love to hear Bombs Over Baghdad. I would love to hear Miss Jackson. I would love to hear some of these things that just staples in the city. But it's like we got to understand, why don't this brother just want to he don't want that, and it made sense. He has a song called I think it's called Sorry. He's featuring with T.I. He says, I hated all the attention, so I ran from it. I hope we ain't lose no fan, something like that. But fuck it if we did. Anyway. But he's telling you right there that I really don't like all of this attention, even though I have this God-given ability.
Right.
Attention really still kind of shakes me and makes me feel
Mm.
wet. And I'm like, we have to really pay attention because I think they said this is like mental health month, and we just had a young football player, 24 years old, played with the Cowboys that took his life, and the main thing they said, one of the main things that stuck out to me, and I did a video about this, they said he lost his mother, and he really was. And that is so hard to cope with. But we are still expecting people have these real life traumas, and they millionaires and they set for life, but they still got the demon in the basement or within. No matter how
Right.
no matter their physical beauty, no matter their how much people praise them, they still. And until you fix that, you ain't gonna be right all the way. You're not gonna be whole. I'll say that.
Right. I think that's very true, and I think that a lot of people don't necessarily understand the importance of, you know, uh the rise to fame and stardom as a young athlete, singer, musician, whatever the case may be, right? You go from a small hometown to pursuing your dreams to hoping to make it big, and then you actually do. No one talks about that transition, right? From no one knowing you to you being a household name. No one talks about that transition. No one talks about the transition of you going from humble beginnings to all of the money that you can't even fathom, right? No one talks about that transition enough. That comes with its own mental health issues, right? Because if you've never been able to handle uh, stage fright, let's call it, right? Or maybe some type of public speaking issue.
Uh,
I was watching a basketball game recently. I don't know what team it was. Don't even care, right? But there was a group of I don't Obasi. There was a group of athletes who had just recently got drafted, and they were talking to them during halftime, and you could see that timidness kind of. They weren't making eye contact with the camera. They weren't making eye contact with the reporter. They were just sitting down, answering the questions, and just wanted to move on to, go back to the locker room to take that break. But you could see the difference in between that adolescent mindset of being a new, star athlete to someone who's a little bit more seasoned, right? They know the anchors by name. They be talking to them and joking to them. They have that little comfort level. You could see that transition. So, you know, I pray that young man's soul transitions in peace, but again, no one talks about those levels, right? They coach you on probably public speaking, interviewing, but nobody says, here, you need a mental health professional who's going to coach you on what's to come when you are experiencing this, right? You can't just go for a drive anywhere. You can't, right? So you have that level of superstardom that people don't talk about, right? And I've always said when I was a kid, I've foreshadowed and foresaw a lot of things. I'm like, I don't mind being famous without the fame. I still want to go to the grocery store and shop. Like, I don't need somebody, and back then paparazzi was real. That's when I lived in New York, so everything is different, right? Everybody want to come to New York, and it was nothing to see A-lister walking in the street or them recording movies in the streets. Like, this was our normal life. So being around celebrities is like, all right, cool, they famous. Who cares? They people like me. Like, that's just how we see it, right? We don't get puffed up by seeing a celebrity like, oh, you got followers, I got followers too, and you were regular everyday around the way person, right? So I feel like people who aren't experienced with fame should be coached on fame, and it should come with a mental health advisor and practitioner, right? Maybe if you're spiritual, comes with that. If you're into church, come with a pastor. If it's Jewish rabbi and ministers and different things like that. If we're talking about Islam, but I feel like everybody should have that person that they can go to and confide to, because at the end of the day, you cannot lose that person that you confide in or that higher power to keep you grounded and centered.
and I feel like that's what the industry does to you a lot. It'll take you from that person because you know the handlers can't handle you with them around. They're always the person that'll keep you humble. And I always have thought about this ever since I've been privileged enough to know you. Like you've mingled and you've done a lot, but I don't think people really know how down to earth and humble you are. Like you've had money, and you're an approachable person, and that's like a rare trait, because let's keep it real. Because I talk about social media classism, right? So some people will get 15K people and they start acting high and mighty, and they like, well, you ain't even, you got 1,000 followers. Who are you to talk to me? And it's like, you bugging, like, yo, you begging on me over followers. And it's always to the mindset, because you just always expect it to go. And it really brings out like, I feel like money and fame, it really brings out who you truly are, right? So like, and you're a woman to speak to this, but I remember when Steph Curry and his wife was saying that, how I interpret it as a man, when she was like, she don't get looks, or she don't get approached, basically, and I'm paraphrasing, by other men. Underdeveloped masculine energy took that as she was for the streets. And I'm like, and you kind of touched on it in a bit of like, want to just feel beautiful. Like, she's so busy being a mother. Yes, she's his wife, but she don't really have her own identity. She tends to the kids. She still want to feel beautiful, like he still want to feel handsome. And I feel like we so committed to not understanding, and we so committed to buying the gender war of, oh, she said that, oh, she for the streets, oh, it's this and that. And it's like, listening? Like, were you even listening to what she was saying, or did you have a preconceived notion already? And I'm like, that ain't what she was saying. To me, it was like, she don't feel approachable. Dudes don't even try to shoot shots at her.
Cause
Everybody
she's
everybody
well,
beautiful. Every guy want to feel handsome. Every guy want to feel like he the man, in a sense, whatever that is.
mhm. I feel like, when I first saw that, I immediately sympathized with her because I knew how she felt. Because, you know, in a previous lifetime, I had I guess a mentor, you could say, if you will. She was just turning 40 my age, right? And she was a wife and a mother of two who had a prestigious career at a university in New Jersey, and she forfeited that to be a mom. And now that her kids were getting a little bit more independent, I think they were like 10 and 13 or 12, something like that, a couple years apart, but they were two boys who always wanted to be independent in their rooms playing games. They didn't want to be with mom. So she, eventually went into being a painter and was really, really great at it, and found herself trying to do other activities to keep her busy. And then eventually she just got a job and went back to work, for full time at home, because she wanted to keep busy, because she didn't feel like she was adding any value to her home at some point, right? She felt like she sacrificed so much of herself to give to her family. And then when it all, her kids became of age, she felt like she had nothing. And I feel like that's just the woes of a mom whose kids become independent. That's what we want, right? We're teaching them how to go to the bathroom. We're teaching them how to eat on their own. We're
Yeah,
coaching them, educating them, and guiding them to do all of these things. And then they're a little bit too grown to want to hang out with you. They're in their rooms all day. You know what I mean? So it's like you raise them to be this way. And now you're like, damn, what do I do? I kind of miss them.
yeah,
And that's where that, sheer independence comes and bites you back, tenfold. So I understand what Curry's wife was going through. She was kind of dealing with her own demons, if you will, because now you're faced to look at yourself in the mirror, and you're like, okay, I mothered these kids, and now they're looking at themselves, like I said, in the mirror for the first time, and they're like, I look older, I appear to be this way when I know to be this way. I want to be desired. I want my husband to still take me out. I want. And now they have all of these unwanted needs, which is how infidelity starts, right? Because a lot of times women are just taking care of the home and taking care of the children, and feel like it's a form of slavery.
yeah,
I've sometimes, have even felt that way, because you just want to be appreciated, because you just kind of get so accustomed to being a routine and on the schedule that you eventually just get blurred to the background. So I understood what that meant, and I feel like it's a really tough pill to swallow, because I feel like we are just once again being trapped into what the American dream is.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Because is that really what life is about? is that really what we're supposed to be comfortable with and living like? Or is this again, once again, a part of the American dream? The man goes home and works, he's the patriarch, he's bringing home the bacon, and you're the one who's at home raising the children. Even if you don't have children, you're still at home doing something, you know what I mean? So it's like, where does that notion change? And you know what I just thought about? Remember when they flash back to the in the series of the 1800s, I want to say her name was Martha, right? The young black lady who was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Um, remember when they were like, "Where did you learn how to sew?"
Yep.
She's like, "My mama taught me." And then eventually they stopped sewing and made her do all the sewing because she sewed better than them. And then they were like, "What was your native language?"
What
She said,
language?
"Always spoke English."
Mm-hmm.
And they were speaking Dutch. So that shows you, like, they were settlers. They planted themselves here on American soil. When she was like, "No, we've always spoke English," and they laughed at her because she didn't know her origins.
And that's what she said. In a sense, she said, "Well, I guess we so far removed from it, Queen, that we forgot." Imagine that. Look, that was 1800. So they, even though they had been removed, they hadn't been that far removed, really, if we look at it. But now, just look at us in 2025. It's like, how far are we really removed from who we are? But that was the crazy thing. Like, yeah, this is how they look at your labor skills, because when the
Mm.
brother walked over and he picked up the dirt, he looks at the dirt and he says, "There's still water down in there." Now, all of them sitting around wondering, because they don't have the skill set. So now we dealing with a bunch of tender dicks. So they don't have the skill set. So they're jealous. So it's like, well, how did he know this? And again, that's when it goes back. Like I said earlier, they go back to he must be something. The anger comes out because he can't be me. He's black. He can't be better.
Mm-mm-mm.
It's like a
And
It's like a never. It's a trap. It's a setup. It's the American dream is always the setup.
I think it's so it kind of um goes back into the conversation that we had before you came on to the live with us, right? And it was about the 50-year mortgage.
Yep.
And to tie that into the clause, right, on this show as well, because at the end of the day, it's still a trap. And, it kind of just makes you feel like, why do they want us to be so included in the American dream when in reality, to me, it's like, why do you want people trapped in a debt society? I don't want to own a home that much if it's going to come with $1 million worth of debt, right? And this is why I prided myself on being free as fuck, because I didn't want to be trapped down to one city that I didn't know I wanted to live in forever, right? People choose a property with the hopes of living there for at least a decade before you start family planning. Let's just call it 10 years, right? Before you start family planning, and then you usually have to get like a larger home because now the home that you have isn't sufficient enough for you and your family. You have to have a bigger property. So now you're signing another 30-year mortgage. So now you got at least 40 years of debt attached to you because the first one gave you some profit and then you kept some profit, maybe paid down some debt, and then went into another, mortgage with probably two people. And no one's paying attention that overseas, they don't really believe in debt, right? Overseas, debt doesn't exist. You want to buy a house, you pay cash. If you wanted to buy a car, you pay cash. No one really carries debt. We're like one of the only few people who have to deal with credit reports and credit card debt and debt and debt and debt. I had did a post on LinkedIn recently for my new newsletter, and it was talking about how we have like $47 trillion in debt. Whole time Dubai has $188 million worth of debt.
See, see,
Night and day.
you made a post, and I see you got some comments. I don't think people got what you were saying. I got what
Sounds
you were saying. You said basically, I'm at a point that I'm unblackmailable, and that's what made me free as fuck. Now, how I interpreted that was, you ain't got shit you can use on me. You ain't got shit that you can bind and beat over my head. You can't
mhm.
you can't trap me with this or that because that shit don't run me. Now, right or wrong.
No, you're not wrong. But some of our old friends felt like that was something wrong. Going back and
That's what
forth
I
with.
get. I'm saying that's what I got from it, and it's like that's how you like. I don't. What makes me, in your words, free as fuck because I don't have any regrets. I don't live with regrets. Like,
No.
like when my mom was in her last days, even last month, I took care of her the way she took care of me when I was a child, right? So I never complained. I did everything quote unquote the right way that a son should do, and I don't live with the regrets. And I think that a lot of my family members that didn't treat her up to par, they live with a lot of regret because they didn't treat her the best way. So that's kind of like the sense. But that's what I got out of it. And I see people like, yeah, you are. You can't say that. How you gonna tell her?
How you gonna like? Who says? And I'm like, realistically, if I decide to say that, that's me manifesting that, right? That's me manifesting that nothing nefarious will ever happen to me. This is how I'm manifesting a clean slate. Of course, I know I have dirt, and if it's the audacity. If you decide to put some shit out for me, what I'm supposed to say? No, that wasn't me. That shit looked just like me. You understand? Like, like I know what I've done, and I know what I haven't done. It's just that I'm not going to sit here and go in the middle of gossip and go back and forth. If you choose to demean my character to help you feel good, and then I'm still going to get behind it and admit it, how does that make you feel better? Then why does that push you to black? Why do you hate yourself so much that you want to blackmail me to make me look less than you? And at the end of the day, I'm still going to be on top. Like, what are we talking about?
It's a control thing. But
Yeah, that doesn't do anything for my
I found
career.
that people was like, no, you're not. You can't say that. You're wrong. I'm like, how gonna tell her she
And
wrong?
this is what helps me understand who has a mindset built for spirituality and who doesn't. Because this is no longer a physical world, right?
Yep.
We're not fighting a physical battle. But because I say I'm unblackmailable, I'm operating in a realm that you can't even fathom at this level.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I was on a sister's live, and she's a dope soul. Like, she really is. I was on a sister's live last night. And whenever she sees me, she's like, yo, Professor, come up, come up. She's like, I know you get tired of me asking you to come up. So she was with she was with a dude. She had a dude that was on there. And what you talking about, Queen, he confused me as a clear thinking man because he wanted to buck break her in a sense, right? So what I mean by that, and see, going back to the movie, because we're still not deviating from it, how they taught you to do the same tactics that they did. So he
Mm-hmm.
kept saying like just crazy things like know thyself. It's good that a woman got knowledge of self, and I got knowledge of self. So after like the 12th time of him saying that, I interjected. I said, "Yo, man, you keep saying you got knowledge of self. What did that mean?" He was like, "Well, it's gonna take me some years to explain this to you." Motherfucker, we ain't got years. Motherfucker, this is like he said, I can't explain it in minutes. And I was like, just skim. And he danced around, made that a whole bunch of gibberish, but he was so filled with himself. And this is what you're talking about. This is the one dimensional. He was so filled with himself of, I got money and I can do this, and I got my passport. And I said, well, brother, that has nothing to do with that. And another brother that was on the same wavelength asked him. He said, well, how are your spiritual views? Now this said, well, how are your spiritual views? He said, well, my mom and dad was married when they grew up, so so them being married. And I was like, and he went on. I said, bro, what does your parents? I said, bro, you see what you're doing? You can't answer a question directly. So why would you think anybody? Hell, I'm a man, and you're not explaining things clear to me, but you want this level and this woman to quote unquote submit. And I did a whole breakdown on this. Stop asking these women to submit. Women, stop saying you're submissive. Whole nother lecture that I could break down. But I was like, bro, you can't even explain how you work. So how the hell you gonna. He was like, well, I'm from the nation of gods and earth, and and here you go with weaponizing this. And I was like, see, this is what I'm talking about, ladies. Like, we have to really understand that, like you said, we not in that same realm no more. That shit, it's cool. It was cool for what it was, but it don't work no more.
It don't. And that's why I'm saying we need to learn how to operate from that love frequency. All of this stuff does not matter, right? At the end of the day, if religion has been around since since, right? 5, 6,000 years, however much you want to say it. If it's been around that long and it has not worked for our people, why are we still walking in that energy? What else is there? When you start watching these origin movies of civilizations, when you watch movies about the civilizations of Earth, they all used to sit outside and meditate under the sun god Ra. That was it. That was how these civilizations thrived in peace and harmony. You
Yeah,
have spiritual people who will have World Meditation Day, and then there are people who are like, "Oh, I don't want to do World Meditation Day because who is leading it? You're leading it. We're
right,
just operating under one force called whatever how you meditate,
right.
whomever you silence and meditate to. But we're just all doing it collectively at the same time, which we see now respond through the Schumann resonance, right? These are all things that we have to pay attention to. And it's not about religion anymore because we see that things are crumbling before our eyes, right? I want to get into like a deep study on my own, but I feel like there was some type of Christian symbolism or even Jewish symbolism behind the government being shut down 40 days and 40 nights.
Mm-hmm.
What is that about, right? What are we ushering ourselves into? Was that some type of spiritual cleanse or spiritual fast? What was the significance behind that? So it's like,
Was it
I,
like, and just throw it out there, I don't know, but was it like to purge from the quote unquote old world and way and go into the new world?
that's what I'm saying. People wander aimlessly, right, in the Bible for 40 days and 40 nights through the wilderness.
Right.
Why did they do that, and you have the Republicans blaming the Democrats and vice versa and doing all of this stuff, but I'm like, bro, we know that there's going to be a new world being ushered in.
Yeah.
Allegedly 2027 the world is supposed to be kaput, because the sun could either operate in a maximum period for 10 up to 14 years. So we think that the sun is as hot as it's going to get, but in reality, it could still keep getting hotter and hotter up to 14 years.
Mm.
So, a lot of people don't realize that these things are true. And if the sun is going to get more powerful, that means that we're going to get more enlightened as melanated beings.
Mm.
Basically what it comes down to, right? That means that you cannot falter on your spiritual practices. Whatever it is that you do to make sure that you're at your highest vibration, then do so. I just feel like I'm being pushed back into being vegan again, which is so interesting to me. And I don't know if it's because I do spend time in the sun or, I'm just trying to align myself back with Mother Earth all over again, that it's pushing me to be vegan or to not eat meat. And I'm like, there's no way I cannot eat meat in the north. Like it's cold as heck down here. Like I'd be freezing up here. So I don't know. There's so many layers that I can get into. And I just wanted to say one thing too, because we all have to be careful with our words, right? Remember in the show, they were able to curse that guy, Mr. I forgot his Epps.
Yeah.
They were able to curse him with their words, which made me think like, wow, we really have more power than we know.
Yeah. And you see his Bible caught on fire.
And then she screams, and that fire of protection, that
Yeah.
wall of protection was able to protect them too. So much significance.
Yeah. No, no, seriously, because remember that's when I said that post that I had that hit a meal and they cheated me. That was the consensus that everybody was saying. And I did a follow-up post. and they was like, yo, we got to be careful what we say. Yo, he spoke his own demise into existence. Yo, he spoke it. He spoke it. Thousands of comments. This is what they kept saying. Yo, he spoke that right into life. And I'm like, we don't, and I followed up and said, everybody, and it made me realize some things, so be careful how I speak. But
Right.
I said, everybody keeps saying, you know, the obvious that he spoke, you know, that into existence. But have y'all ever think that because we're constantly manifesting, whether we know it or not.
Right.
But do we ever collectively think that the more we're saying with this anti-love frequency, and we're saying how we ain't this and we can't get along, and black women ain't this and black men ain't this and black children are this, we're manifesting it, we're speaking it. So that you can't reverse it when you keep affirming that this is what it is, and you keep affirming that you're giving them their power. The more you keep saying, "See how they do it. See how white people do it. White women treat you better. White men." Oh, we got to understand, like you were saying, how to break the curse. The curse is like we got to break our demons within. That's what it showed. Like you saying, we got to deal with what's in. We got to deal with what's in the basement of us.
Mm-hmm.
Go out there and face the world, but we can't go out there and face the world and fight that. And we got to come back and we got to host of that within. But I was like, yeah, but we got to do like these movie breakdowns more.
Yeah.
The other one I was telling you, I was like, yo, anytime I think of like movies like that, you are always like one of the first people I think of, because I know your mind is going to get it. I was like, yo, see this shit right here, like this is. But you know what? They got a second season.
I know it. I saw that. It came out last year, I think.
Yeah, you got to see that one because, yeah.
I hear it's really interesting, and I was just over this one so much. Like this was so dark, and someone called it white trauma porn, or something like that, because they were able to, get off on seeing us suffer.
Yeah, that
You
makes sense.
know, there was no, and honestly, I could say that I thought about that halfway in. I'm like, white people must get off to this because this is horrific.
Because
You know,
you saw it though. You saw the level of when the barn and stuff was catching on fire and they lit them on fire. You saw the like euphoric stage that they was in. They were in bliss. I'm sure one of them did get off.
and it's so sad, and like I said, it just made me appreciate, what our ancestors have done for us, right? We're still able to go out into many stores and drive on the road any time of day. Of course, we're still being precautious, and we don't have to live with green books, right? So, we live a different type of lifestyle now. We're thankful, that they have, you know, I hate to say suffered, but they did,
Yeah,
for us to live today the way that we do. And we're not by any means completely free. We still have to toil mentally and spiritually and even financially and physically, dealing with this race of people. And something that you sent me the other day about Indians being considered white, that blew my top because I
yeah.
always thought they were considered Asian Pacific.
That's why
Like, well,
I was like, what do you think about this? Yeah.
I am appalled because to me, anyone who checks white as a race is paid top dollar.
Mm.
So, they specifically ask you that for two reasons. I think based upon how they can pay you and the type of tax credit they'll get for hiring you.
Mm.
And then that show, ooh, let's talk about this. Remember, I think her name was Betty.
Yep.
What made me think about this, right? Before we like close or whatever. Thinking about Betty, she had her own slew of trauma. She was molested by her father.
Yeah, incest going on. And
And
white sex as I call it.
her husband was gay.
So so listen, because we noticed she couldn't conceive. So I wanted to know, I was like, was that due to the father?
She probably never wanted to be intimate with her own husband. And he obviously was not attracted to her because don't forget, I don't think you caught this, because the cop who pulled him over, he was like, "I saw that you went into that bar. It just looks like a regular bar from the outside." He was talking about a gay bar.
He said, we'll just say you was at the wrong place at the wrong you was
Yeah. So she was molested,
no,
and
I heard that, but I was like, where the fuck was he? There it is.
don't forget, yes, because the other white guy called him out his name and he stomped on his wound.
Yeah.
Yes. That's when I put it together. I was like, oh. So there were many things addressed in this movie, and all that showed me is like they're not exempt from any of their own personal traumas. You just don't see it.
No, no. So with the covenant, because remember, it's to bring us hell or they suffer hell. But I'm like, they got their own thing, and that's. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad it came from another energy source because that's what I want people to understand. Listening to this, that just because it's not plastered all over everywhere, they have their own things too. They do things too. And it's like I was saying on my live, I was like, we even got to understand the news and the newspapers. And for those who read that, all of this stuff is designed in a certain way to when they give you the information. This is why we lead the news off in crime. And you see young teenagers or young men, home invasion, but you never really see them because they control how we see the crime. They don't
Listen,
they don't care. Anybody that can look at the Tangerine Touchers and his crime, and they say, and this is what I was like, and I tell people, I was like, y'all got to be careful how y'all criminalize people, right? Because they don't care about controlling crime per se. They just want to control how we perceive it.
the narrative.
Yeah,
I was
because pardon all these people. He just pardoned a whole lot of people the other day.
again. I thought they did a whole bunch of pardoning on Martin Luther King Day.
He just did some more.
So I was thinking about something. I think 2 weeks ago, Wall Street Trapper, he said something about the stocks and things like that you should be invested in. And not only are we to study the companies, you should also study the CEOs of these companies. And many of them, such as Trump and I think Jeff Bezos, they own media companies, right? So he was talking about how Jeff Bezos purchased the Wall Street Journal, I think. Not the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post. He
Mm.
purchased the Washington Post, and he's like, a lot of these people, they're involved in a couple of things, but most importantly, they're involved with tech and they're involved in media. And when you involve yourself with media, you allow yourself to be opened up to advertisement. So now you're getting advertising dollars, but you also can control the narrative of what's being pushed out, right? So now that made me break down the whole concept. Just that little nugget made me break down the whole concept of social media
Yep.
and how there was a time back in 2016 when I had first started my online store, BU times two. I started out as just selling my books that I wrote and then eventually segued into an online store selling clothes. And then we did drop shipping, we did a whole bunch of things, right? Just with that same website. But I used to run ads on Facebook and would make thousands of dollars every single month by running like a $5 ad. Now, if I ran a $5 ad, I would probably just get views to my post, but people wouldn't convert and make purchases. That was the difference between now and then. People were becoming millionaires doing $5 ads on social media because it was a new way to earn income. So now, when I think about how many forms of social media there are, and how people are still advertising on them. Think about the TikTok shops, right? That people have. I get emails to me all the time, even though I'm not active on TikTok. I don't even know my freaking password at this point. So it's like I still get emails about TikTok shops, other TikTok shops, products that people are selling out, that are bestsellers for TikTok shops. So this is still a form of advertising, right? And at now we could look at it and it's no longer a form of entertainment. They're pushing out other pages to us. My whole timeline is filled with random pages. Do you want to follow this page? And it's always being new content flooded to me, but I don't know none of these people anymore. If it's not an ad, it's a new page that I've never seen before. So again, this is a different type of media. They're pushing out different types of content based upon your personal algorithm or based upon the cookies and things that you're looking at on your phone. It's no longer what you decided to follow and elected to see. And that's where this becomes dangerous because it is Meta is technically turning into its own form of TikTok
Mm.
without us even realizing
Mm. Makes sense.
it. Hmm.
Yeah, because when you slow down and you really realize, like, yeah, I damn so do see that. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, and we gonna got yeah. Yes,
I messed your head up. My bad.
I'm really no, I'm really just processing it, like
Mhm.
because even to go from the $5 thing, because like you said, that was the new wave at that time, and then it died down, and there's something else. And then when I'm looking at how I literally saw a dude, I literally saw a dude grab a video of what appeared to be himself, but it was AI and it wasn't him. So when I'm
Mhm.
slowing down and I'm thinking about a lot of what you're saying, I'm like processing what you're saying. It's like just watching how Meta, watching how AI, watching how all of these things like really doing a real paradigm shift right in front of our face. And it's like,
Because 2026, they Meta Platforms has a new uh thing where they're going to be before you had to opt in or out. Now it's almost as if it's going to be automatic for all unless if you opt out. But realistically, your content is already being studied for AI. So now they're just going to be creating a new version of yourself and probably pumping it out anywhere in the world unbeknownst to you based upon your likeness, based upon your conversation, based upon your DMs, based upon, your content, your comments. All that stuff is being studied. So that's why I'm like, I love it here, don't get me wrong, but it kind of just forces me to want to remove myself, delete my page content. Sure, I want to leave it out for people, but there has to be a better way.
but see, that's why I like, remember I was saying to you when we was talking, I said, I think I'm kind of like just emptying the tank. Like, because once it goes, like, yeah, you should have kind of caught me in real time, or you should have caught me in the ones that are the ones, they'll have access and I still
Absolutely.
educate, but it go back to what you always saying. You got to get some. It's gonna come a time where we got to get quiet because they listening. And when I sent you that article about how um ICE is like study ICE like they're studying and looking at you and they're anything that negative or objective look at ICE that's kind of frowned upon. And I'm like, yo, which is why with these silly Trump Trumpers, they not even. I've never seen this level of brainwashing. Like I've seen a lot of cults. Warren Jeffers, I've seen a lot of cults from Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard. I've seen a lot of cults, and all of them, but this one right here is a special one because it's gobbling up people, and I'm like, so y'all voted anytime because they're only going to give you 3 ounces. So y'all voted to say, we're not down with the rainbow agenda. Fair game. Okay, cool. We want to control what our children see, right? That's y'all battle cry. That's what made you get up and go push that red button. Cool, that's your choice. I don't care about your choice. That was your choice.
Mhm.
But you're literally ignoring these agents, going into
Mhm.
homes and abusing them and doing all of these things, and you're literally watching children be abused. But that's not. It's like I did one this morning. I was like, the math ain't math.
Heck no.
So yeah, we know what time it is, and it's like, yo, but I think we gotta do more of these reviews like this.
We will. We definitely will, because I feel like I was we just talked about Mercury rising, right, the other day. It's an old movie.
Yeah, you write that down because Layla threw my attention off last night.
Yeah, yeah. I want to definitely, discuss Mercury rising because we know that before it was every 1 in 30,000 children had autism. Now it's like every 10,000. So, autism is very prevalent in today's society. I went to a park over the weekend and they had a playground just for autistic kids. So I thought that was really interesting too. Of course, there were any type of kids in there just playing, but the fact that it's, segregated is something a little bit more interesting than I've ever seen before. So the fact that this movie Mercury Rising with Bruce Willis having an AI who was also autistic crack the CIA code was very, very interesting. And it caught the attention of the government, of course. So if my memory serves me correctly, he's like chasing this kid around. People are actually looking for him, and I don't think I've ever caught on that this was an AI before. So now I really want to watch it because those are the two things that are the most prevalent in today's society. Fast forward to 2023, you got AI, and then you have autism.
Okay, I wrote it
Which is
down. I wrote
way before our time, and it came out in 1998.
I wrote it down. So look, we got to also because I also want to do the movie Him. Yo, okay,
Yes,
so
girl.
we can watch it, and I'm gonna watch Mercury Rising
Yeah.
today. I'm gonna watch it, and if I can't get to it today, I know I'll do it before the week is out.
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely probably search for it right now, actually, just because I have a little bit of downtime. But I'm
Okay.
definitely gonna look into it because, like I said, I never realized that it was an AI, and the fact that there were three codes for the CIA, and two of them have already been cracked, but the third one has yet to be cracked, still present day. I thought that was really interesting, super duper interesting. So, I feel like people know that the CIA is this clandestine organization, something that's like, top secret. You will never know that these people work for them or could be a spy. There's plenty of people in our history that we know to have been spies for the CIA. They allegedly say that Epstein was also a spy. So, there's multiple layers to this. But I definitely think that is something that we should watch because what are they not telling us through this code? What is it in plain sight? Because it's literally plain sight that needs to be cracked, that we need to find out about. But anyway, it's definitely getting late. I definitely want to wrap this up. We've been live for almost 2 hours now.
Well, I
Always
can't.
a pleasure. Yeah, this is normal context for sure, but I'm getting butt lock sitting on the floor right now. So,
Okay.
guys, anything closing remarks you want to say?
No, no, just pay attention. Keep your head on the swivel out there.
High key facts. Definitely. I don't have anything to say. I feel like, the show is definitely alarming and it comes with its own set of triggers and traumas. There are a lot of things that could trigger someone into their own, dark psychosis. But, just keeping, like you say, your head on a swivel and recognizing like we still deal with a lot of trauma and we still show up every day to get shit done. I think that it does play on the fact that we are some type of special and chosen people because only a sacred chosen people could do what we do on a daily basis and still have such trauma and such harshness running through our veins on a daily basis. So keep keep focused, stay focused, and we can only hope and pray that Babylon continues to crumble before our eyes because everybody's time has a end time and we are seeing a democracy crumble. We're seeing a civilization crumble. We can only hope that it hurries up. That's it. That's all I got. All right, Obasi, great chatting with you. I'll probably call you on the back end.
All right.
Peace.
Peace.
Peace, y'all.